Good morning, everyone. Hope you guys are enjoying the morning so far. It seems to be flying by. I can't believe it's almost 11 o'clock. We have Chris Ventura here with us today, who is going to be talking about engaging with our local government. I know for young professionals and young people in general, it can be something that's a bit overwhelming or a bit daunting. So really excited for him to go through this presentation with us this morning. And before we get started, I'll give you a little bit of a background of who he is and what he does and how his experience plays into what he's going to be speaking to us about. So born and raised in Niagara in Port Colborne, and he attended Brock University. He has an arts degree in political science, history, and a master's of education degree in leadership and administration. When he attended Brock, he was dedicated to dedicating his spare time to building a better Badger as a student leader, mentor, staff member, and advocate. He began his career in the political community engagement in 2016 with Pam Damoff, a member of parliament in Oakville North in Burlington, as her community engagement manager, where he executed local engagement strategies, ensured continuity voices were heard and decision makers at the table at the federal level. And in 2018, he assumed his current role, which actually we just found out he just got a new role and will be back here in Niagara, but he was working as a community office manager where he assists with the complex challenges that the federal government and also supports those. He's passionate about helping others build capacity and donates his local time to serving on a couple local boards, including the Brock University Alumni Association and the director and the Mental Health Association Board of Directors. So he's going to go through the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and we will get started. So over to you, Chris. Excited to hear what you have to say.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Taylor. Yes, good morning, everyone. Excited to be giving this presentation and excited in a few weeks to be rejoining the Niagara region. I'm going to work for the region actually in the clerk's office. So very timely that we're giving a presentation on engaging with local government. So I thought I would just make sure I preface this with the whole idea of this presentation is that it's local government 101. If you've already had extensive experience interacting with or engaging with your local government, I just want to be really clear that like this is a presentation intended for someone who's like, I don't know who my counselor or my mayor is, and I don't know like where to go or where to find that out, because I think it's really important for every citizen to understand like how to interact with their local government and what they actually do. So with that, I'll start the presentation. I know we got a great land recognition at the start of our presentation, but I also just wanted to note that while we are in the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe people, it's really important to understand the treaties and the treaty relationships that we have here in Niagara. So we are covered primarily by two treaties, the Mississauga's Treaty at Niagara of 1781 and the Between the Lakes Treaty, which is treaty number 3, I believe the largest in Southern Ontario. And we are in the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. I would really encourage you to look into the treaty history of where exactly you live. There's some great maps and resources online, and to better understand our relationship with our Indigenous folks that we share the land with. And just a note on my presentation, like while the skills and strategies like are applicable across like interacting with many different kinds of organizations, Indigenous governments operate as a nation and they are totally separate from the governments of the Crown. So I'm going to be focusing primarily on the governments of the Crown, which would be our local municipal government. So I just want to be really clear, if you are planning to interact with or work with any Indigenous governments, that they're treated as a nation and you should treat them with the respect and the dignity that comes with being a nation-to-nation relationship. So we're going to go through a few things. So there's 4 levels of government here in Niagara. The federal government is the furthest from most people, even though we think of it as like our primary government. When you're thinking and talking about politics, it seems to not always focus on either the national or provincial level. And, generally your kitchen conversations aren't so much focused on your regional or municipal government. The federal government, is our international representative. They're responsible for national projects and benefit programs. Transfers to several other levels of government, for example, like healthcare and social services, are paid for by the federal government and administered by the provincial government. Indigenous services and crown negotiations, as well as international relations and trade. So when you're thinking like trade deals for Europe or how tariffs coming in from products from different countries, that's the federal government. The provincial government is the next closest one to most of us. Again, it depends on kind of what your situation is, but healthcare, social services, education, policing, provincial infrastructure, so like the 406 highway, landlord tenant relations, etc. The region oversees the whole region of Niagara, including all 12 municipalities. So things like waste collection, public health and safety. So most of our COVID response is directly from the region. For example, childcare facilities that are publicly owned, long-term public care facilities, and the EMS service is also a regional service. And then your municipality, there's 12 in Niagara. So whichever city you live in, they're responsible for most of the things off of your front driveway. So that includes the streetlights and sidewalks, curbs and bike paths, like city streets, stormwater management, bylaws and permits. So if you want to build a new shed in your backyard, you usually need some sort of permit to do that. Local services like transits, libraries, museums, and business development areas. So I know when we think about most of the big problems of the world, we tend to think about the biggest solutions to those problems. And a good example that I like to use is around climate change. It's a very polarizing, very large problem, very difficult to solve. It feels very esoteric. I don't even know how to touch it. And it's not really surprising because it does require a global effort in order to actually tackle it. But so when we think about it, we're thinking about international agreements like the Paris Climate Accords, national climate policies. Like every federal party now has some sort of climate policy that they're trying to put in place to reduce Canada's emissions, decarbonizing the economy and what that means for rural workers, specifically in the energy sectors in Canada, and how we make sure that they're going to be okay and we can transition them to different jobs, and institutional investment changes. We know that some of the largest pension funds, for example, are starting to divest from oil and gas, but that's very far away from where we sit down here in Niagara and what we're actually doing. But the good thing is that there's lots to do here locally in Niagara. We can talk about increasing coverage and efficiency of transit. We can talk about building active infrastructure like bike lanes and multi-use paths. We can talk about wilding lands, wetland management, or urban forest growth. Tree planting is something that you can do right here, and municipalities do a lot of. Building rain gardens, something to again deal with the overflow of stormwater. Zoning and strict bylaws on dumping, and specifically stormwater management. 99% of the land in Niagara is either owned or regulated by your local and municipal or the regional municipal governments. And stormwater management is a huge part of that, where the more structures there are, there's less places for the waters to go, the more likely you are to have flooding in any coastal areas. So that represents a lot of big communities in Niagara. Think Port Dalhousie, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Fort Erie, Port Colborne, Ridgeway. They all are in a floodplain, and the more structures we put up, the more water is going to be displaced to folks there. Improve recycling and compost programs, your green bin that you put out in your compost bags. Energy efficient infrastructure. How do we make sure our buildings that are owned by the government are operating at their peak performance? Electrifying local vehicles. There's an entire fleet of hundreds of vehicles in every municipality, from work trucks to dump trucks, that are currently running on gas. How can we convert them away to electricity? And water pipe leakage, which is I'd be happy to talk to you for 3 hours about it, because 40% of the water that is shipped into Port Colborne is lost through leakage, and that equals about Olympic-sized swimming pool for every 20 houses in Port Colborne that are just gone. And it's a waste of money, but it's also like a waste of perfectly good fresh water that just goes away. So like, and our local governments are responsible for fixing that problem. So, thinking about those things, like what can you as a citizen do, who's not elected to some sort of office? Well, we'll go through a few things. We'll identify who you should talk to, how you can identify them, how much work you should do, how do you find allies, and how do you get your message to decision makers? Because they're the ones who actually do need to vote and allocate resources to solve some of these problems. So identifying who we want to speak to. Niagara has 12 municipalities and a regional government. So you probably know the city that you live in, and you know that you live in Niagara. Within each one of these maps is a division of wards. So then again, like the city is further subdivided down. So in total, there's 12 mayors and 94 local councillors, 19 regional councillors that are elected to represent each one of these municipalities, and one council chair for a total of 126 different elected officials across the region. There's also 4 school boards within the region that are also elected, and those trustees, represent both public and Catholic and French and English and all of those combined boards as well. So there's quite a few people that are elected across Niagara. And how can you figure out who it is that represents you? The best tool ever is Google. You Google the city or town you live in. So I would say Pelham and then mayor and council, and then it will bring you to a main page on every municipality's website that can actually break it down. You can also search Pelham ward map or St. Catharines ward map, and you can actually see where those subdivision lines fall across the whole region and across your city. It's really helpful to know because a councillor that represents your area is much more likely to respond to you and to be interested in any local issue that you're interested in. So it's a really good idea to try and figure out exactly who represents you and what they do. If you are unable to do that, 211 is a great resource. It's the In Communities information line. You can just dial 211 on your phone, ask them any question about really anything, including your local government and who represents you. Every city and town has a general information line as well that you can also call to try to get additional information about elections and the folks that represent you. Municipal social media accounts and just Googling or going on Twitter or Facebook and searching like the city and town you live in and council and mayor. Again, like super easy. We have a kind of running joke in our office that our member of parliament represents the district of Oakville, North Burlington, and nobody talks about Oakville, North Burlington, except the elected officials who represent this area or are hoping to. So if you just search Oakville, North Burlington, you're going to absolutely find everyone. So if you search St. Catharines Ward 2, you're only going to find elected officials or people speaking to elected officials about issues in Ward 2, because the average person doesn't think about where their ward is as necessarily like where they live. They think they live in St. Catharines on this street. And that's perfectly fine. It's just like, that's an easy way to identify folks as well. So beyond the elected officials, there's also municipal staff. They're a nonpartisan professional public service. This is what I am joining in a few weeks when I jump on board with the region. So the public service is always at the city. They undertake all the administrative functions of actually delivering services and making sure that policies are implemented. They follow a fairly typical corporate structure with a chief administrative officer at the top of that. And then they oversee commissioners that represent the various departments, and then beyond the departments, there's managers. So it's very typical. They're a great resource for specific and technical questions. And again, that customer service line at your town or city would be great to call and say, I have a question about the stormwater pond behind my house. I'm not sure who to talk to. They will find it for you. They're like a concierge service, and they will be able to find the exact staff members that you need to speak to in order to have your issue addressed. And then beyond that is the greater civil society. Now, of course, we're being brought together today by the Niagara Chamber of Commerce, who's gracious enough to work with the Next Niagara Committee as part of it to like represent the issues of young professionals here in Niagara. But they're one of a tapestry of organizations like not-for-profits. As mentioned off the top, I'm on the board of CMHA Niagara. They're just one not-for-profit in the mental health space within Niagara of several. And again, they work with local local governments and are funded by the region and work with the region on a number of projects. So like all of these different groups, charities and journalists and activists and service groups, they all interact directly with the local government, and they are there to push and influence. The good thing about these groups too is that the local governments rely on them as much as these groups rely on the local government for this work. So it's a really good place if you have like a very particular advocacy issue or a challenge that you're trying to address. These groups are generally have probably done the work already, and you can jump on board and find a place to help and find allies in your cause. So now we'll talk a little bit about how we actually go about talking with these folks. I have this kind of theory of the case based on my time working for Pam DeMoff on a work to payoff calculation, because sometimes, it can feel like you need to put in like, hundreds of hours of work, but like really you only needed to send one email. So to me, it's a triangle. First you have your scope, which is like, how intense is this issue? Is there safety concerns? What's the level of difference that can be made locally? How might it affect folks with different socioeconomic statuses, ethnic and cultural backgrounds? What is the harm of the issue? So this is really like saying like, what is the project you're trying to work on? And how big is the scope of the actual project? The scale is more based around how many people would it affect? Like, does this affect you at your house? Does it affect your neighborhood? Does it affect your street? Does it affect your city? Does it affect your ward? So just thinking about like how big of a problem it is. And then the benefit, like what is the payoff of actually figuring out like what the actual payoff is. Now, this calculation, you have to make it yourself, and it's very personal to you. And it varies for everything, but what you're really shooting for is a sweet spot kind of right in the middle of these three competing desires. Because, like if you do get something done and it's a great benefit, like, the amount of work you had to do to get that benefit, you have to make sure that you've actually like calculated that out. So an example would be like replacing a stop sign or putting in a four-way stop in your neighborhood. So if you're starting a petition in your neighborhood, social media campaign, writing to media sources, building online support, just to replace a stop sign or add in a stop sign, you're likely doing too much work for not enough benefit. It wouldn't be necessary to do this much work, even though there will be a benefit. It's just like, you need to think about like, what do I actually need to do to get this done? Now, to kind of go on that example as well, like sending an email to your local counselor and to staff, that's about the sweet spot for working on that. Now, if you get pushback from that, of course, you can continue that conversation. But again, like the scope and scale of doing something like that is important to take into consideration. Now, another example would be building a community garden in your neighborhood. Like, obviously, this is a much bigger project. It requires city budget dollars. It requires land. It requires buy-in from the community. So again, using the same example from the start of starting a petition, social media campaign, writing to media sources, building an online support. Yeah, that would certainly be something that you could do for a project like this in order to build a community garden in your neighborhood. I know a lot of communities are doing this sort of thing now, and it wasn't as popular a few years ago when I was trying to do one in the city of Port Colborne. And, it's a bit of a grind to like get everyone on board to do this sort of thing. But definitely worthwhile, especially when you have a lot of folks who like live in an apartment and who may not be able to build a vegetable garden in their backyard to have access to fresh food. So again, like it does, you need to like really think about that calculation. So how to identify allies? I think the best thing always to do is start with your local representatives. Now, if your local representative isn't supportive, you can certainly find one who is. Your local rep, like everything else, they are a politician. They do have a certain viewpoint and perspective. And that's totally fine no matter which side of the spectrum you fall on, but they may not align with your specific values. I know just like from following a lot of Niagara politics, like every council seems to have, some folks who are on the more progressive side, some folks who are on the conservative side, and that's okay. So even if your local representative is not necessarily doesn't align with your values, I'm sure you'll be able to find one in your city that does. But what you're really hoping for is a chance to present your issue clearly and invite them to support you in that initiative. And you're trying to get the best thing you can hope for is, how can I help? When you get a local representative who actually like wants to take the time to try and enable you and get your project done, that's really powerful. And I would just make a note as well that like positivity goes a long way. If you do get pushback, like, you can just take it and say, thank you, like, thanks for your time, and move along. But when someone is positive, noting that and actually putting it out into the world is incredibly important. I find that folks in our office, like, who contact our office all the time that are very angry, they don't get as much of a response, if any response. But the folks who, like, even if they have tough questions and challenges, like, we're happy to work with them, to try to at least like have them be listened to, and work with them as well. So if you are going to a representative who doesn't represent your area, just be clear that you have spoken with your local representative and you're not getting the support that you need. It is challenging from the elected official perspective because they are representing a specific area of the city or the town, and their responsibility is first to their constituents, and then to the city at large. So just be cognizant of that and just be aware of that. Most folks will be understanding that, oh, I've already spoken to so-and-so and, they weren't giving me any help, and then they'll be willing to help. And really important to have like a summary of work that's already been done. So once you've found a representative who's supportive of your cause, because of their position in the community, they generally have a large relationship with other groups and stakeholders across the region. If they offer to put you in contact with someone, definitely take that up on them. Take notes in the meeting and see what other groups they mentioned. So even if they don't offer to put them in contact with you, you can certainly say, I was speaking with so-and-so representative and they said your organization was doing work on this project I care about. That's a great to get into some of these groups. It's sometimes difficult to cold call an organization. I completely understand that it's a little bit scary, but when you kind of have that, like, oh, I was speaking with this elected representative and they were super great and said you guys were doing awesome, like that definitely helps. Identifying those community stakeholders and support is really helpful because, like I said, you're usually not alone in your thinking. If you identify an issue like, there's always flooding in this neighborhood, there's likely going to be other people who are also experiencing that flooding, and there are also going to be organizations who are trying to help folks with a lower socioeconomic status, or who are connected with other organizations to solve that problem. Sharing positive experiences with others, again, is like a really powerful tool. I can definitely tell you, personally, like all elected officials are people, and they respond better to positivity and to helpful engagement. People who come forward with like a very complaining attitude, as opposed to like, how can I help and like, how can we get this done? Like it definitely, can fall on deaf ears sometimes. So like, I would definitely recommend that you, work hard to bring forward like a positive experience or a positive engagement with them. And that also goes for social media as well. Like I can't tell you how many more people engage with a positive tweet when I put something out about, how amazing this person was to work with, than me complaining about someone who I don't like and I don't get along with. Definitely goes a long way. Talk to experts. Brock and Niagara College are both here in the region. Brock has I think it's changed now, but it's the Niagara Community Observatory. So they're very aware of local issues and are working very hard on them already. So I think they're a great resource. Niagara College, I'm not as familiar with just because I haven't worked or been a part of that organization, but I know that they're very involved in the community and probably also have experts that could be able to help you. And finally, talk to your neighbors. There's been a lot of studies lately showing that like most people don't know who their neighbors are and don't talk to them. They also live on your street and they're also facing the same issues that you are. It's a great way to start a conversation with someone on like a common goal and trying to build something together. People respond really well to that. And I think it's a really important thing to bring forward when you're thinking about how can I get a project done. And finally, or a second last slide, sorry. I wanted to talk about communication strategies. Some of this is a bit of the same of what I've talked about before, but just to kind of give it you like a very clear space of like what exactly works well. Personalizing your story and message. We get hundreds of form emails a day in our office, and we send form responses back to those form emails. But if someone writes to us about the exact same topic with a personalized story and message about their particular situation, more than happy to spend some time writing up a message back to them, engaging them with a conversation, offering phone calls, trying to get in touch. So if someone does send you something that says, I'm just trying to send around this form email, like, yes, if you're not as passionate about it, for sure, you can send that form email. But if it's something that you really care about, spending a few minutes minutes just to write up a personal email and tell your story goes a long way. It's a lot harder to ignore. And if someone does ignore it and you go somewhere else, it's also not a good look. So highly recommend doing that. Local journalism matters. We're very lucky down here in Niagara that we have several robust community publications, including the St. Catharines Standard and the Welland Tribune in Niagara, the Voice of Pelham, and I'm sure I'm going to miss a whole bunch, but you know, we've got quite a few journalists here in Niagara that are reporting on and focusing on local issues. Be sure to support them, be sure to check them out. And I mean, if you have questions, you can always reach out to the reporter who wrote a story on a topic you care about to try and get more information. And they may also be able to connect you, not necessarily with their sources, but like with the folks that are also working on those stories. Prepare shareable content for others. If you are working on a larger project, I know, you know, there's you as the person who's very passionate about building this project. You're going to have a bunch of people who would like to do the project, but are not, like, you know, bending over backwards to do all this work. If you can make that as easy as possible for them to have something to share out, if it's just a graphic and some text, you know, and then they can post it into their networks, into their social media as well. It goes a long way. It just makes it super simple. You know, you just have to spend a little bit of time. There's free services like Canva that you can actually make some pretty good graphics on. You know, it's a very, very helpful tool to try and get your message out as far and wide as you can. Identifying channels of support. I mean, there's so many Facebook groups I've found in Niagara for, you know, your neighborhood, your city, you know, buy and sell groups, dad groups, mom groups. Like there's all these great places to actually get your message out and to work with people and share with people. Make sure you do spend some time trying to identify those channels of support and see like what you can actually do to engage with those folks. And building relationships is another really important one. I mean, this goes for everything, but when you build relationships with staff or with elected officials, it's a lot easier to kind of, you know, when you've had a lot of short communications with them, when you've actually like put in the time to get ahead and to actually, you know, make change and kind of get some traction. Prepare for negative responses, but don't get stuck on them. There's always going to be haters. There's always going to be haters on social media. If you've ever read the comment section of anything, there's always negative responses. Try not to get hung up on them. You know, they're the ones you remember because they sting and you kind of forget the hundreds of nice messages that you get. So just don't forget that there's a bigger picture and there's a lot of people supporting you. There's power in positive messaging. I think I've gone over that quite a bit. Be clear in your ask. Sometimes, like, you know, you kind of get bogged down in the 3-letter acronyms and the project, but just be really clear of what you're actually asking for. Be prepared to keep the conversation going. Like, you know, if someone ignores one email, follow up with them. If they continue to, like, go talk to other people about it, you're going to have to do some legwork to keep the conversation rolling. And have an open mind about ultimate goals. Sometimes you'll go and speak to staff and they'll explain to you why something isn't possible. And there's usually some good safety or regulation reason that it's not possible. So be open-minded about what success looks like. It can be challenging at times. And I mean, it doesn't mean take no for an answer for sure, but like, just think about the bigger picture when you're thinking about what your actual goals are. And I can see I'm running out of time. So I thought I'd just give you 2 quick opportunities that you can explore. One would be exploring municipal committees. Every municipality has advisory committees that are maybe of interest to you. And it's not necessarily around government. They're around arts and culture and accessibility, social issues, development, museums, environment. So you should definitely reach out to your clerk's office. And the next municipal election is 508 days away on October 24th. So, you know, make sure that you're listening for the next year and a half to what your local representatives are saying and see if they deserve to garner your vote or if you should vote for someone else. So thanks so much for coming today. And if you have any questions, I don't think we'll have time, but I'm happy to jump into some of the networking sessions later and chat with you if you want to catch up.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, we won't have time for questions here, but that we have your channels that we can share with everyone that has attended. And like you said, there is other networking opportunities throughout the day. So feel free to reach out to Chris with the channels that we have for him. So thank you very much, guys. And we will connect later in the day.
For sure. Thanks, everyone.